And today we have Clint and myself. Clint is our product manager for the Target and Kroger products here at Supply Pike. And we actually have beautiful pictures of ourselves on the next slide. And then I will be your host today. I'm on the Supplier Wiki team, and I help with all of the writing and research that goes into creating some of our content here at Supplier Wiki. So excited for Clint to lead us through today because he is definitely a huge expert on Target and Kroger and all the things we're going to talk about today. So with that, we'll get into the agenda. First things first, we're going to do a quick overview on Target compliance and some new news that came out, I believe, Clint, you said just last week. So excited to get into that. And then after that, we'll spend most of our time in viewing compliance and partners online and some of the supplier expectations. Then we'll transition into reversal scenarios for OTS and OTA. And then we always like to leave about 15 minutes at the end for any of the questions you may have and open discussion. And then as a bonus, we will be doing a product sneak peek so you can see what Supply Pike for Target looks like and get a taste for that. All right. And then some of the FAQs that we have are first, will you get a copy of the slide deck? Yes, at Supplier Wiki, we always send the slide deck in PDF format and a video recording to your inbox in about 3 to 4 business days. We can usually do it faster than that, but we like to give ourselves a little bit of lead time so our designers can work on that. As well as if you ever are looking for an old recording or an old webinar deck, you can find that on Supplier Wiki. We have on-demand webinars, and those also can be found on our YouTube page, as well as the copies of the PDF slide decks for all of our webinars. And then another question that we get often is, what is the best way to ask a question? So I'll be managing the questions on today's webinar. I'm going to be paying attention to the Q&A tab so that those 2 speech bubbles on Zoom, if you type your question into that area, that's the easiest way for me to see it. What I'll do is if the question is pertinent to the conversation or the slide that Clint's talking through, I'll go ahead and interject the question so we can talk about that. But for most of the questions, I'll be saving those for the end. And then our chat feature, please use that if you have something that you want to engage with in terms of the discussion or just one of your supplier tips. This is a learning community, so anything that you have to share or contribute to the conversation, we'd love to engage with and hear from you. All right, and then lastly, if you are new to webinars and you haven't engaged with us before and you're confused on who we are a part of Supply Pike. We create cloud-based tools that help CPGs reduce revenue loss. And we do this in a couple of different ways at a couple of different retailers. Today, we're focusing on Target, and we'll be focusing primarily on compliance at Target, but we also have solutions at Walmart, Kroger, and Amazon. And also in 2024, we will be releasing a couple new retailers that we will be in, so that'll be exciting, so look out for that. And then the last thing I'll say before I hand it off to Clint is we've worked with about 500 plus CPGs, and you can see some of our partners here that are listed. And if you haven't worked with us before, we'd love to see your logo up here in the future. And so with that, Clint, I'm going to pass it over to you to get into today's content.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so first off, let's talk about some recent stuff with Target compliance. So last time, if you came to our one of our previous 101s, we mentioned the ongoing rollout of ShipIQ. That is continuing. So they're on wave 9 as of about the beginning of October. So wave 10 should happen here pretty soon. If you haven't already transitioned from VRS or vendor ready to ship to ShipIQ, if you're a collect carrier, expect that to happen soon. And just a reminder, if you remember, there was the VRC, the vendor report card, and then the SPM. Both of those have been combined into just the SPMD, or the Supplier Performance Management Dashboard. And shout out to Target's Supplier Performance Management team. If you don't work with them, they do a lot of their own office hours, and they help you. You can get a dedicated person who will help you figure out, like, hey, what are our issues? How can we prevent them? Root causing, all that kind of good stuff. So they're a really good contact to have. So definitely dig into there, and I'll show you a little later where you can find some more resources around that. And then the brand new thing that happened last week is we got a heads up on a new metric coming that's called Supplier Pickup Adherence, or SPA. So this is going to be partnered with the on-time release, or OTR, and both of these are going to be new expected fines sometime in the future. I was expecting OTR to already be being deducted at this point, but they've not yet enabled it for actual compliance deductions. Supplier pickup adherence, they said, would be available this week in the SPMD, that app we're going to be spending a little bit of time in today. There are some pages that have a new SPM or a new SPA area, but not everything does where you might expect it. So it's brand new. It's literally rolling out right now. So definitely check the news when you log into Partners Online. That very first homepage, they post the latest happenings and alerts. So keep your eyes on that. Hopefully you log into POL 1 or 2 times a week. Just check that little news section and you can kind of stay up to date on this kind of stuff. But I would say, if you are a collect supplier and you've been getting your OTS, or on-time ship type compliance fines, those are going to shift, and OTS will be replaced by this OTR and SPA. And that's on-time ship was all about like, hey, when did it ship? Was that in the window? With Ship IQ, they didn't, and they said this in their documents about it, they didn't initially plan for Ship IQ tracking that as far as a metric. So that's what this SPA, supplier pickup adherence, is. So on-time release will track, okay, when was the order released within Ship IQ by the vendor? And then that gives you a window based on lead time for delivery. And SPA is all about, okay, when was the pickup window? So there's the metric for when was it released in Ship IQ, and then when was it actually pick up from your facility. So those will be 2 new metrics replacing 1 metric that we expect fines either by the end of the year or sometime in the first half of 2024. So that's the new thing. If you haven't seen that, again, go check out the news and alerts and Partners Online. Or you can, when you get into the SPM, Supplier Performance Management Dashboard, we're just going to call it the SPMD from here on out. When you get into that app, there's a few places where they will link you to information about that. So we'll point that out here a little bit later. Okay, so moving on. Real quick, we're going to blaze through. We have so much content today. We're going to blaze through a quick overview of compliance, and then we'll jump into kind of the best practices for using the SPMD app, and then diving a bit more granular into the expectations related to those fines that you can see in SPMD. Okay. So fines, deductions, defects, chargebacks, all these things are mostly the same thing. It can be a little bit confusing, especially if maybe you came from the Walmart world and they use the acronym OTIF, or Target might sometimes say OTFR if you're on a call with them. But we're just going to say compliance. The intent is it's anything on time or fill rate related for Target. And we'll get into, if you know, exemptions and exceptions and how that's related to violations versus deductions and chargebacks. We'll get into that here in a second. So just a note on terminology. We're mostly just going to say compliance when we talk Target. Okay, real quick, deduction buckets within Target. There's about 10 ways you can lose money at Target. We're showing you here the most common 8. Invoice match, that's your shortages, A030s, cost differences, A036s, etc. Returns are RDDs, those are returns from stores and DCs. Compliance, that's what we're focused on here today. That's in full, on time. Contractual, those are your Target vendor income, discounts, markdowns, allowances, etc. There's e-com, there's audits, post audits, there's import deductions, and then there's unpaid invoices, which are like deductions by omission. So we're focused on compliance here today, but just FYI, there's all these other ways that Target may withhold money from your checks, or come back later and take it in the case of an audit. So for compliance deductions and just compliance policies in general, this trend has been growing over the past many years as commerce increases, as technology increases and enables retailers and vendors to have greater visibility into the supply chain. There's more metrics that are popping up, and it's generally all meant to protect against out of stocks, right? Retailers and vendors want to have the right product at the right place at the right time at the right price, so that shoppers can get what they need, and hopefully it's a win-win all around. And we expect this trend to continue, just as technology gets better and tracking gets better, visibility gets better, systems and knowledge are spreading out and becoming, everyone's kind of leveling up their game around compliance and supply chain execution. We just expect all of these things to continue. So don't expect it to get less. If you're following Walmart news, it's kind of a weird thing that they're reducing some of their OTIF fines, but at the same time, they're introducing and raising their SQEP fines, right? So they're introducing more fines, not getting rid of stuff. So net, just a note on that. And if you look at your check lines and you're maybe not very familiar with what are compliance deductions, there will be a document number column in your check lines from Target, and anything that starts with VC0, that's going to be a compliance deduction related to fill rate or on time or ASN. If it says something like VCNA or VSUP, those are contract ones, but anything that says VC0 and then the next two digits are going to be like the month and then a random string of numbers, those are going to be your compliance deductions. And these will apply to both collect and prepaid, and we'll call out those differences throughout the webinar here. And note on the fines themselves, Target's pretty aggressive compared to most other retailers as far as the fines they take. So the on-time portion, they want you to be at 100%. And if you're not at 100%, they will assess 5% cost of goods on anything that was below that goal. Same thing for fill rate, 5% cost of goods for anything that's below 95%. And for EDI 856, the ASNs, that's the advanced ship notice that goes out hopefully around the time of the shipment arriving. Those are going to be the goals 100%, slightly lower, 3% cost of goods for anything that did not arrive with an ASN. So, okay. Real quick, the process. So you may be aware there's a few different windows that can happen. So initially, when Target is receiving an order, they'll assess, like let's say there's an issue. Could be maybe there's a fill rate issue. They think they're short. They'll assess a violation right when they come across that. So if that happens today, they assess that violation. We've now got a 2-week window that starts. And this is where we can get into this exception and exemption process. So during that 2 weeks, like if today we see a violation, 2 weeks begins, Target could grant an exception. This means they're proactively saying, oh, you know what? We see that something's short here. We see that we've assessed a violation, but actually that's okay. We're not going to turn this into a deduction. Here's the reason why. Like, yeah, maybe there was a tornado that hit DC 580 or something, or, something happened with their carrier and, their carrier messed up for some reason. So in that case, they can proactively grant an exception and waive the fine during this 2-week window. If they don't do that, suppliers can request an exemption. And you'll see these terms reflected, exception and exemption, throughout Target's portal within SPMD, that app. And this is where the suppliers can request, like, hey, I'm saying for this violation, here's my proof. And you submit that through a contact form on Partners Online, and you can try to dispute it before it's deducted. And those can be granted. But it's got to happen during that 2-week window. And the SPM team works these, the supplier performance management team. They work those. For these exemption requests, they'll typically get back to you within 48 business hours. So if you submit something on Thursday morning, you'll probably have an answer by the end of Friday. Could be early Monday. But a note, and we'll repeat this throughout, the data for SPMD, the app only updates once a week. So you generally are able to get ahead of these at the start of the week and start that process and not have to wait too long. But definitely try to take advantage of that 2-week window. If you're not given an exception, try to request an exemption to prevent these deductions from being deducted in the first place. Like, let it just stay a violation. Don't let that violation turn into an actual chargeback that is deducted. If that happens where they did not grant an exception, they did not grant an exemption, either one was not requested or they denied the request, then it is actually deducted. It gets that VC number assigned to it that you'll see on your check lines. And we'll look at some of these in the SPMD app here in a little bit. That's when, okay, now that it's actually deducted, you have to go through their Synergy Vendor Dispute app, or SVD, if you're familiar with that in Partners Online. And it's just like disputing most other deductions. You need some proof for why you think this is an invalid deduction that needs to be paid back. And again, it goes, the SPM team will work those. Their response time is not quite as fast for Synergy disputes as it is for the exemption requests, but it's way faster than most of the other dispute types that go through Synergy. So typically, a Synergy dispute for something like an A030 carton shortage might take up to 30 days, which that's Target's SLA to give a decision. It may not be a thorough decision, but they will make some sort of call by the end of 30 days to say approved or denied. For compliance disputes that go through Synergy, typically the average for those is 9 days. So that's way better than waiting 30 days for a decision. But yeah, if you do get a reversal granted for those, you'll see that come back on the check line and it'll have a different VC number, which is great. Hard to match back up, but it can be done. And just pointing out here, like, you've got 90, after that 2-week window, 90 days to dispute these. Most other Target deductions have 18 months. These only have 90 days, specifically for the on-time, fill rate, and ASN compliance deductions. Just 90 days. And real quick, just showing some trends here that we've observed. So this is usually a big question a lot of suppliers have. They're just kind of, you only have your own data. You're really not sure, like, hey, how big of a problem is this? Are we in about the same boat as everyone else, or not? Is our business way different? So looking at some trends across vendors, we see that in general, the number one reason for deductions is shipped late. Coming in second, about a little over half of that is fill rate revised, and ASN late, ASN missing, PO fill rate revised, IPC, that's with the modern ones. But generally, it's fill rate revised and ship late are going to be your most common ones. So just FYI, if you're not sure, like, hey, how are we comparing to average? This is going to be your average that you can benchmark against. Okay, so hopefully we're all relatively familiar with Target's compliance program at that point, and now we're going to dive into some actual content from the SPMD app. It's been, like I said, refreshed since the summer when they combined VRC and SPM. They had those legacy purchase order formats that were the 474, and then they had the new format, which were the 114. They all start with like 1000, right? Those are the modern ones. And they combined both of those because they were operating separately. They put those all in one app in the SPMD. And usually when we're talking to suppliers about compliance, if it's a logistics team, they might be pretty familiar with this, but if you're on like a finance team or accounts receivable, you may not be as familiar with this app. So we're hoping that this can be useful, but let's take a look here. So when you click the app SPMD in Partners Online, so your apps and reports, and you scroll down to Supplier Performance Management Dashboard, you click that, you land here. There's a lot to look at here. So let's walk through this and we'll figure out what's actually important. So contacts, like, yeah, you see that on the lower left, you can check that out. But most of the stuff, if you want like actual data and tracking and where can I get something useful, that's what we're going to get into here. Okay, so navigation, so ignoring that walls of text down there, this bar up here is how you're going to want to think through the different parts of the app. So the summaries and the details on each aspect of targets compliance. And some of these are more important than others, right? Like if you look on the far right, that SIFR percent, Target doesn't actually track compliance against supplier item fill rate. That's what that acronym is. So we're not going to dive into that because it's not something that's actually being deducted against. You can see that data if you want, but they're not taking fines based on it. Okay, so summary, clicking here, we'll get a quick overview of compliance by month. This is what you land on. Again, it's a lot to look at. The important parts here are showing you by the metrics what's actually being fined. So on-time ship, that's for collect orders going through VRS. On-time arrival, so those are prepaid vendors. Fill rate revised, that's for everybody. And EDI 856, availability, not accuracy, just presence of an ASN if you have to have an ASN. Vast majority of suppliers do need to provide ASNs as part of their shipments arriving to Target, but not all of them do. So it's important to understand, should we be sending 856s? If you're not getting any fines for that and you're not sending any, great, you don't need to. Okay, and then scrolling down a little bit farther here, we can see at the top, we've got our latest week performance. So this is the last Target week that was measured. So since we're here in the second full week, that's going to be last week up there. And then down at the bottom, this is where you can see kind of your metrics by month. So this particular set of data we're looking at here, this vendor is shipping both collect and prepaid. That's a little unusual. Most vendors are doing one or the other. Or if you're prepaid, maybe you occasionally have to do some collect. If you're collect, you're probably not doing any prepaid. But you can see by month, okay, for the starting on the left, on time ship, they're giving you a score like, hey, what's that percentage by month? You can see they had a few where they hit 100%, but it looks like based on some of those zeros and low percentages, they're not shipping collect primarily. They're primarily shipping prepaid, and that's in that on-time arrival. So that second column with data there. And based on their color scale, they're saying a lot of this is really bad. And it may be. You can see they're giving you an average days late for prepaid. Then you can see the fill rate original and then the fill rate revised. And if you have a question on original versus revised, typically Target will send you an 850. And that's an EDI 850 purchase order. And that's the original fill rate number. And then the vendor, you may get back with a cut sheet and communicate with your inventory analysts at Target and say, hey, okay, you ordered 100. I can only do 90 to this one location. So here's that change. And generally, they're going to get that in before they receive the inventory. And as long as they do, you should be fine. But if they don't, that would be on them for not updating, even though you sent the cut sheet in a timely manner to let them know to expect a different number than what they originally ordered. And that would be an example of, okay, well, you said you're short, but we did communicate timely, and here's my proof in that email chain with the inventory analyst. So you could, if they issued a deduction for that, that's something that you could, or a violation, you could exempt that. Or if it became a deduction, if you missed that 2-week window, you could successfully dispute that during that 90-day window. But sorry, that's a little beyond the screen here, but this is just giving you a quick overview of buckets by month. So going on to the next section along that top left is the defects area. So this is just Target. Again, they're calling all these different compliance buckets defects here. And we want to point out especially that you can see overages here. So if you're curious, like, okay, are they getting, extra inventory here? Or are we not quite getting paid for everything that they're receiving? This is a way you can start to dig into that. And we'll show you a little bit later how to expand one of these dashboards. But if you were here, you'd want to expand maybe that lower dashboard, which has the actual units. And then you could start digging into the actual orders and the items related to those to see, okay, did we get paid for these? Were they accounted for if there was a deduction? And generally, Target will account for overages and shortages with their deductions. And if they see something over somewhere and something short somewhere and they can offset each other, they will typically do that for you. But it's worth double checking their math because there are people on the other side of this and we're all human and we make mistakes. So just FYI, you can see some overages information here, which is it seems like that's not very well known within the target vendor community. So I wanted to point that out, especially here. Going on to some other areas here, we're going to be looking at some prepaid data, but everything we're about to show over these next several slides is relevant for the collect OTS, the collect OTR and SPA when SPA starts populating this week, maybe, or if you're doing fill rate or supplier item fill rate or the EDI 856s, everything we're about to see is going to be generally the same format and places to look and same things to click. Certainly the data will be a little different, but as far as how to navigate, it's all going to be the same. Okay, so when you land here, a lot going on. So we actually want to scroll down to find something useful. And that's when you're going to land on this page here. And you can see there's going to be a few different tables, and there's actually several of these on this page, but we actually only want to focus on a couple of places right here. And it's just these two bottom tables that are actually going to be useful to us typically. So the left one is where you can see violations, and that's what you want to use to help start the exemption request process to prevent a deduction, to head it off and get it waived. So that's that table. And then on the right, this one that says the compliance research report, that's the one where, okay, either we missed the exemption or it was denied and it has become a chargeback. This is where you can see those chargebacks and you can start to get data to help take action on them. So it'll tell you, hey, what's the department if you're in multiple departments? What's the actual reason behind the deduction, right? Was it shipped early? Was it shipped late? Was it fill rate revised? Was it I'm missing an ASN? What was it exactly? And I guess with sometime in the future, is it the collect on time release or is it collect supplier pickup adherence? What is it? So that's that sub rule column. You can see departments, POs, locations, items, even. That's where you can start to see that kind of stuff. So we're going to highlight this bottom right table here. You highlight that bottom right table when you mouse over it, and this is the same for anything in Target's Greenfield portal. And you see this in the top left, see that little green G square looking thing? That means Greenfield, and that's Target's internal BI tool that they've built for all their supplier data. So whenever you're in a Greenfield area of Partners Online, you can hover over a table like this, and that little icon right there means to expand it. So you click that and it gets way bigger and you can see a lot more data. And that's where you can start to see, hey, can I, if I need to get this data out, how do I export it? Because you'll notice here, there were no options to export any of this, but you may need it in the spreadsheet. So this is how you get there. You click that expand, and then you land on this view, which is that same information, but bigger, so you don't have to scroll as much. And then on the far right, you want to click this kebab icon or these three vertical dots, and then that'll give you the option to export. So you have to do a couple more clicks. This little arrow will be pointing down. You'll click it. It'll open up like this, and you can see export to CSV. And that'll get you into a spreadsheet finally. And pro tip, don't forget, if you're working with a CSV, which stands for comma separated values, that's not the same as a regular spreadsheet. It may look the same in Excel and you can manipulate it and do stuff, but if you don't save it as a .xls or .xlsx, it will forget your changes. So if you've done some, pivot tables and summing and lookups across it, if it's still a CSV file, when you close it and try to save it, it won't remember any of that. So make sure you save your CSV files as Excel files to keep any of your work that you're doing in those. Okay, and let's say you've gotten some of this data and you're starting to try and engage in the exemption and disputing process. How can you follow up on what's going on there? So there's this tab they have there called compliance status, and it lands you on this page. And you can see they've got kind of a timeline. It's not to scale, so it can be a little misleading to look at, but they do tell you, hey, here's that 2-week exemption period. 3-month dispute period. And then they say if there's disputes after that 3 months, they won't reverse them. Not entirely true. If you try to dispute them through Synergy, Synergy will not accept your dispute. So that's true. But you can, especially if you see like a trend of those, like you can gather those together and then work with the SPM team to see if you can figure out a beneficial resolution for anything that maybe after that 3-month dispute window and is Target's fault that they need to change a process or make whole for the vendor. So yeah, so, and I'll say it again, the data in this app, this SPMD, updates once a week. So you may hop in here Monday, and if you hop back to Wednesday, you're like, hey, it's the same. It updates once a week over the weekend. So just FYI on that. And scroll down to see something actually useful here. So this is, if you scroll down, this is what you're going to see. This top table is where you can see all your recent deductions. It's not going to be comprehensive. If you expanded the table and then changed the time period, then you could get way more data. But it's generally just going to have the last 2, maybe 3 months of data up here, depending on kind of the volume of chargebacks that you're seeing go through here. This table down at the bottom left, that's going to be your summary by week of different buckets. So they'll say, hey, for this week, here was, an aggregation of your fill rates or your on-time arrival. Different week, here's that aggregation. So that's what that is. You can also expand that and click into it. A lot of the data that builds these different views is the same data in the background. It's just Target serving it up a little differently across the app. And then the last part of this tracking area for compliance status, they've got these things, again, a lot to look at here. So we'll break it down. This top table, if you've scrolled down to that part in the app, this is your year-to-date performance, and they're breaking it up by month again, and they're specifically calling out, hey, these were the violations that were assessed. Not all violations turn into chargebacks. They can be exceptions, they could be exemptions. You could dispute them, they could be reversed, and then they'll show you your net. But they could also be things that they assess violations for, but they're not deducting for, right? So the supplier item fill rate or the ASN accuracy, which they only check availability for an actual deduction. So just something to be aware of, like that violation number can be pretty scary, but the more important ones are going to be your exception, exemption, and your chargeback and reversals. Then on the bottom left, for anything that has gone through that exception or exemption process, they'll tell you the status of those. And so you can, see like, okay, if you weren't the person that requested the exemption, you won't get Target's response back because they do engage in an email process. It's like a ticketing process for the exemption requests. So it's going to go back and forth with whoever initiates that. So if you didn't do that, you may not see their response, but you can see the tracking here. You'll need to pay attention to the amounts, or you'd have to expand the table, and then that'll give you the violation IDs if you don't know the amounts offhand, because could be a better table. They can make some improvements there. And then if they do deny anything, this is where you can see what do their denial codes mean. So, okay, that's a lot of information on using the SPMD app. There's a lot more in there that we haven't covered today. I'm hoping that showing you, especially right up here, the kind of keep in mind how you're navigating stuff. Like that's going to be really important. Like, okay, if I'm tracking down a prepaid fine or a collect fine or a fill rate fine or an A856 fine, those are all going to be in different spots based on how Target has set up this app. So you can customize it, but that's probably needs to be a 301 webinar on how to build custom cards in Greenfield, and that's beyond the scope of today. But if you want that, let us know, because happy to put that content together. Okay, so let's talk about supplier expectations for compliance. So for fill rate revised, yeah, they want you to ship 100% to the revised quantity, either from the EDI 860s and 870s, or from the cut sheets. And again, that's, you received a purchase order and then you filled out Target's spreadsheet and got back to the inventory analyst like, hey, okay, you requested 100, we can only do 90 at this one location or these other locations. Here's that information, and they should update that. And like it says, communicate those quantity changes as soon as you can once you receive the PO. For prepaid, you want to make sure that before making the appointments, you've got all that sent. And for collect, prior to the VRS entries being made and the 856 being sent, and same thing for ship IQ, right? As soon as you've got that PO on your side, definitely double check with your teams on what actual available inventory do we have and can we meet this PO at full, yes or no. But communication ahead of time is the name of the game for preventing deductions. So yeah, like I said, anyone that, if you don't proact, and this is all Target's language here. So if you're not proactively communicating those cuts, they will try to hold you accountable for revised quantities that they do receive. The cuts may not be approved, and that's, a conversation between the vendor and the inventory analysts and the merchants, right? So make sure you're engaging in that process. Definitely check out the fill rates in the SPMD that updates weekly, once a week. And if cuts were approved but were not applied, you do want to take time to either submit that exemption request, or if you miss that 2-week window, dispute it in Synergy for that 90-day window. And here's an example Target provides on the fill rate. So they're saying, hey, if we had item A, we ordered 50, but we didn't receive it, but we did get 100 of item B, 50 of which Target didn't order. There's going to be a shortage and an overage. So that's ideally, they are taking an account into like, okay, well, we're going to find for the shortage on this item and the overage on this other item. Those will be reflected on their chargeback documents if they issue like an A030. It'll look a little different if they're doing it in the violation stage here, but just something to be aware of. And if anyone has questions on like, wait, can I get a fill rate deduction and an A030 carton shortage deduction? We haven't seen that happen very often, but if you've got any concrete examples of that, we'd love to hear that. That's something that we want to try and make easy for vendors to understand, like, is there double dipping going on here? Like, can we do something about that? So something to look out for. For on-time ship expectations, and if most vendors are still on VRS, but a lot of folks are transitioning over to ship IQ. So that's going to change from on-time ship to on-time release and supplier pickup adherence when those actually turn into actual fines. But right now, VRS is still kind of the name of the game for these on-time deductions for collect. They do want shipments in VRS 2 business days prior to the requested pickup date. So if you've got a Wednesday pickup, it's got to be into VRS by 11 a.m. on Monday. Shipment entered on Tuesday at noon CST, that requested pickup date would be for Friday or later. And definitely check out Target's training. They have a big library of videos and articles and PowerPoints and Partners Online. So you definitely want to look into that if you haven't already. And we're going to speed up a little bit here through the content. Same thing for prepaid, work with your carriers to make sure your freight arrives at Target's DCs within the requested dates. They do have some variations there for large parcel versus small parcel, right? So small parcel is going to be your FedExes of the world. And if you're prepaid and you're going to miss those, again, communication is the key to either preventing an exemption or minimizing the deduction there if you can. And 856, double check, should you be sending them? There's a small handful of vendors who don't need to send them, but if you should be, You want to make sure that they're going out accurately and timely. And the main thing is, hey, like get it out there no later than trailer closure. And if you're not familiar with EDI data, there's typically pretty good timestamps available for those. So if you do need to dispute those, double check with your EDI team. There is some EDI data available within Partners Online that you can access. It's a really old, clunky app. I wouldn't recommend it. But if you can't get it from, if you're having trouble getting EDI from your internal teams, Target has an app called the B2B Data Exchange app. And through that one, you can see Target's copy of EDI data that they've sent you and that you've sent them. And if you don't have that app, you'd want to reach out to your Partners Online admins and ask them, hey, can you add this app to my account? So, okay, real quick, some valid reversal scenarios. There's quite a few more than this. So if you don't have Target's Word doc of their compliance policy, definitely check that out within Partners Online. Hit that search icon in the top right corner of their app or of the portal, search compliance policy, and it should be one of the very first results, and it's a Word doc. It's about 19, 20 pages. Definitely worth reading that to find all the valid reversal scenarios, as well as checking their pages within POL that also list them. So if they've ordered something that was much higher than intended, and the supplier notified Target of this error, but the quantity was not revised, as long as you've got that communication, that's a valid scenario for reversal. So again, communication is key here. And hopefully you're keeping your emails that are going back and forth with those inventory analysts. And also if they communicated, but then they didn't actually make the change when they said they would, that's another valid scenario there. And yeah, cuts weren't executed by Target, same thing. If you've got screenshots of confirmations, either from Rider or DocLink, depending on what type of DCs you're going through, or your research report from Greenfield, or your especially the email communication, that's excellent documentation and support to win your dispute or exemption request there. And for the 856, like I said, if you've got a copy of that EDI document and you can see when, like the timestamp for when that was sent compared to maybe when Target thought it should have been sent, that can be how you can win those as well. So, and I know we're going through some of this really fast, but like I said, we will send you copies of this. So hopefully it's not too fast, but if you need to come back and refer to it, you can. Yes, and for the not later missing, yeah, make sure that they are free from like critical errors, because you may have sent it, but if it's missing something that is required for the transmission to be considered successful, they might ding you for that, saying like, oh, well, yeah, it was missing the PO location, or maybe the items weren't listed correctly, and so it broke the transmission. So that's something that you'll want to be aware of. So if you see some of these fines, you can take those back to your EDI team and say, hey, like we're getting a lot of violations and fines and chargebacks based on our ASNs. Like that's an easy one for us to fix. So definitely try to fix those. Okay, live Q&A.
All right. Great job, Clint. We got in on time with moments to spare. We've got a question in from Tanya, and she asked, based on credits and debits, I see the same dollar amounts, but at different DCs. It looks to me like a Target cross dock that we ship is breaking up our pallets and sending cartons to the wrong DCs. So just generally, maybe you can give us some best practices, Clint, and then we'll go to the second part of Tanya's question.
Yeah, so you're experiencing, unfortunately, what's a fairly common thing that collect suppliers have to deal with, in that Target's carriers, especially, when the consolidators, if it's going through multiple legs of a journey, which sometimes they go through multiple consolidation centers, they can mix up stuff along the way. And that's really unfortunate. So there's ways other vendors have tackled this to prevent that from happening. It can be making sure your labels are right, like you're following Target's label guidelines, which if you're not sure where to find those within Partners Online, that's something that we can send you a follow-up communication on, Tanya, as far as, hey, here's exactly where that is in Partners Online. So we'll do that as far as carton labeling requirements and recommendations from Target. And making sure that the boxes with the labels are facing out, right? Not mixing products within a layers, right? So make sure your tie highs are correct. But then also color coding can be a simple thing. So some companies will invest in color coding their boxes, right? So if you have a bunch of blue boxes or a bunch of red boxes or green boxes or pink boxes or yellow, whatever it is, hopefully that's just one more cue to the people that are working with these products. Oh, like these two things are both yellow, like maybe those should stay together. Or maybe it makes them double check the label and just, oh, okay, like we were going to route this over here, but it needs to stay here on this with these other pallets and go with this truck, right? So those are some little things that other companies have looked into as far as their process. Like, okay, can we do something with color coding? Are our labels correct? Can we do something with the size of those maybe, or the placement of those, or how our shrink wrap goes around the pallet? And then also making sure that labels are always facing out along the sides so that if there's scanning technology going on, that's able to accurately scan things, but also for the people that have to look at it and deal with it, their job is as simple and as easy, and there's as few barriers as possible in place. So that's kind of that aspect of it.
And then the second, oh, did you want to add anything else to that, Clint? No, that was great. The second part to that, I think you really answered the what can be done part of Tanya's question. That second part is this something that SupplyPike can help with?
Yeah. So we try to make it super easy so you can see the data around orders and like, okay, like did Target misreceive something, or did they receive it across multiple appointments when maybe they shouldn't have? Or okay, if I just want like a single quick export where I can just see all my items and everything Target says is short and everything they think is over, how can I line those up by location, by dates? Yes, that's something that we have that is, in my opinion, easier and nicer than using Partners Online. But yeah.
Thanks for that, Clint. And then we have one last question. Nick asked, I may have missed this, but any VC deduction that we want to dispute has to go through Synergy. Is that correct, Clint? And maybe advise on some other best practices there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a deduction that says it starts with a VC and then it has a bunch of numbers, yeah, absolutely. It's already been deducted. So that 2-week exemption window is passed, and now it has turned into that 90-day dispute window. But you do only have 90 days. So definitely hop on those, especially Target can sometimes take multiple rounds of disputing. That's less common with the compliance deductions. Typically, whatever the SPM team says, like that's going to be the final question, but you can dispute those one more time. But if you've disputed it twice and the SPM team has said no both times, either you're going to need to try a different tack or bring some sort of different information to bear to help help them understand your point of view on it. But yeah, those typically have to, if it's a VC and then it has like, yeah, the month of the violation that when it happened and then a bunch of numbers, yeah, it's got to go through Synergy. Have your proof documentation as attachments with that case, and you should get a response on those. Average is about 9 days. So could be 5 days, could be 14, but hopefully it's around that 1 week time period.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions that we had. Thank you, Clint, for walking through those and all of the content today. Give Clint a round of applause for getting through that because we had lots of slides and he came in on time. That was awesome. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide just to give everybody some visibility into some of the resources that we have. So if this is your first time on Supplier Wiki or you're, a regular around here, we want to still let you know that we do have always free resources for CPG suppliers. I sent the common Target compliance fines in the chat, and you can also find Target deductions explained, as well as other resources for retailers like Walmart and then Amazon and Kroger. And with that, I will share Clint and I's emails. These are real emails. If you have any questions about what content we covered today, I know I'm going to be following up with Tanya. We had a little chat in the chat feature on Zoom. So if you do have other questions, you can please reach out to us, or you can also find us at supplypike.com. And then with that, this is usually where we end our educational portion of our content. If you have to go, we totally understand. We're actually going to do a quick dive into our application, SupplyPike for Target. So if you are interested in kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis, a different tool to manage your deductions at Target, stick around. But we understand if you have to hop off here. So Clint, I'll hand it back to you to go through SupplyPike for Target.
Sure, yeah, and a quick shout out to some of our help articles here. So we have this Understanding Target's Compliance Program. So again, if you're not someone that's in the logistics side of your company and you're just trying to understand, like, wait, what is this thing? How is it different or related to other stuff? We've got this quick article to help you understand what are the goals, why are the goals up here, what are the fines, and then, like we said, they've got some things that are measured without fines. So don't sleep on our help content. It's all good stuff too. We've got a lot of great stuff in Supplier Wiki as well. So in our app, so this is our demo environment here. We try to help you understand, like, hey, what's the general health of your deduction situation? How's that all going? So you can see what's been disputed, what's been won back with us, what have you auto disputed or bulk disputed? How many deductions did we help prep 100% of the documentation for? And how many documents was that? Wow, almost 1,600. Like, how much time would it take a person to go gather, 16 different hundred documents from, various share drives and carrier portals and payment apps to get invoices, et cetera. Like, hopefully we're saving you a lot of time here. Tracking, this is a bit high for most companies, but tracking what's your deductions as a percent of all your invoices. In this case, the demo data here is showing about 27%. The overall average for most Target vendors is 18%. But if you're just looking at like carton shortages and returns, that's usually about 3%. Unpaid invoices is usually a whole extra percent. And compliance is usually about a whole extra percent as well. So within our data here, on our dashboard, you can filter by dates. So if you want to focus on your fiscal year or year to date or just a month, you can do that. If you want to dig into just specific codes, so like, okay, I see this data, there's a lot of stuff not disputed, but what about just our unpaid invoices? Okay, here's that. That's a big chunk of it. We can go back to all of them. Or if we want to see just carton shortages, what's that looking like? Oh, not bad. We've got a lot of that in progress. We've won some back already. A few denials. We might need to redispute that. Some things over here look valid. Cool, got it. Here's a quick win rate, and you're approved. Things that could still be disputed. And these two are different because there's probably some that are too old to dispute, and so you might need to mark those as will not dispute so they can move over here. We do show you your aggregated data by code. So you can see here a selection of codes here. This is not everything we do. We do have return deductions. We've got compliance fines. So those are not here in the demo account. You can also see, but aggregate by type, so you can understand what's our biggest problem. Like, okay, unpaid invoices are the largest count and the largest amount. Seems like something's going wrong and Target's not acknowledging our inventory fully. So we've got to figure out how do we help them pay us for what they've taken, and then can we prevent some of this going forward. You can also check to see, okay, do we have a lot of paper cuts or not too bad? Looks like not too bad in this situation. If we had big spikes in the under 100 or this smaller 100 to 1,000 bucket, that would tell you, okay, there's a lot of high number of small deductions, but this is a large number of large deductions. Then you can also see a trend over time, and you can filter that by, okay, is it damaged defectives, or is it more carton shortages, or which one seems to be spiking in different areas? Oh, seasonal spike there, maybe. But definitely looks like unpaid invoices is kind of the thing here. And you can also see these by type of item. So you can understand, what items might be driving the most deductions. Is there anything we can do in particular to deal with those? So while the steel sausages, these are all just, it's fake data, it's made up. So the steel sausages have the highest count of deductions. Looks like the wooden gloves have the highest amount of deductions. So maybe we care about those a bit more than the steel sausages because they're hitting our bottom line a bit harder. So, and you can also see deductions by location. So if you know there's a particular DC that is impacting your business the most, you can pick that out and focus on that and trying to understand, hey, anytime we're sending shipments, either prepaid or stuff's getting picked up, headed for that DC, we see that we get a lot of deductions through those, especially. Is there something we can do about that? Something differently, kind of like what Tanya was asking about earlier. Can we, can we double, triple check, just make sure we've done everything we can in our power to make sure stuff is picked up and transferred and received accurately at the consolidator and on target side, and reduce as much room for error as possible. So just it's really hard to get a lot of this data and aggregate in one spot in a clean way out of Partners Online. So this is one of my favorite things that we do, is providing these aggregations. And if you have to do a lot of presentations on deductions within your company or sharing across teams, you can export this data to an Excel file. All the data will be ready to chart. We're not exporting the charts for you just in case you need to customize them yourself, but all the data is going to be ready to throw into an Excel chart or a Sheets chart or slides or PowerPoint, ready to customize for your company as needed. So, but that's just the aggregated data. There's a lot more beyond that. We can get into all the specific deductions here. This is where the magic really happens, where you can dispute things. This is a carton shortage. We do tell you how much time is remaining. So if you've got 90 days left, we'll tell you that, or how much is left. If it had 18 months, we'll also tell you that. So some of these have like 10 months left. Some of these have 13 days left, but you can dispute 2 or 3 of these at once. So we've just sent these 3 all together. They are on their way to target, just like that click of a button. You did not have to log into accounts payable domestic. You did not have to find that check line. You did not have to pull that proof document, the chargeback document itself here. You didn't have to go dig around and find that in either PDF or Excel format. We pull that in for you. We pull in Target's delivery receipt for you. You didn't have to try and find that. We integrate with shippers and carriers and different shared drives. We pull in bills of lading, match those up on the purchase order number. You didn't have to go dig that up. You also didn't have to provide an invoice or a PO because we're using Target's copy of your EDI data to generate these documents for you. So everything you need to dispute this is already here. We're telling you it's ready to dispute, and you can dispute it one by one, just like that. It's on its way. It's getting a synergy case created right now, and you can track that progress here. And once it gets paid, you can, check up on those. You can filter just the ones that were through SupplyPike, just the ones that were auto disputed. If you have to deal with ones that get disputed multiple times, you can filter for those. You can export all this data at this level with a little bit more, as well as at the item level. Yeah, it's a super powerful, fast application. And we're a software company. We're always trying to make improvements here. So if you do use it and you have suggestions for improvement, definitely let us know. We'll try to work those in, because this is meant for you guys. We want to take the friction out of this process and try to make supply chain and especially this revenue loss side of it, just so much less of a headache. And just real quick, we do have unpaid invoices. It's usually a big hit with a lot of customers. We provide that invoice, we provide that BOL, we help you get paid when Target lets their bills go past due, which surprisingly they do. So same process. Let's dispute 25 of these at once. There we go. It's that easy. Okay, I think we're a little over time here, but that's the demo. There's more beyond just what's here in the app that we're showing. This is just the demo app, but we have way more in the actual production app. So, yeah.
Awesome. Clint, this has been great. I've even learned some things today. So thank you for walking us through all of this content and walking us through a little product preview, as well as all of our attendees that have stayed on. We appreciate you guys and hope to see you at another webinar. So everyone take care.